Welcome back to another episode where today I'm joined by one of the world's leading authorities on brain fitness and neuroplasticity, Dr. Michael Merzenich. He's not only the brain behind Brain HQ, a leading brain fitness program, but also the author of Softwired, how the new science of brain plasticity can change your life. In nearly 50 years of world-leading research on how our brains can change, Dr. Merzenich has helped invent the cochlear implant, published over 150 scientific papers on brain plasticity, and help people all over the world build better brains. So Dr. Merzenich, welcome to the show.
That's nice to be with you, Max.
And I'm so excited to have you today because what I love about your work is you're not just a phenomenal researcher, but you also have this ability to then take the research on all this complicated stuff. And I've read a lot of your research papers, and they're hard to read for the average person. But you have the ability to take that then into a normal language so that the general population, everyday people, can actually benefit from it. And so one of the great myths that you've busted throughout your career is this idea of the static brain. This idea that you're either born smart or dumb, happy or unhappy, quick-witted or not, and that's essentially how you're going to stay. But that's not really the case, as you found, is it?
It is not the case. The brain is a work in progress, and it operates as a function of how it's engaged, and it's subject to continuous advance and improvement. But of course, in order to advance and improve, you have to engage it in ways that drive that positive stage, right? So, but it's a wonderful asset in that we have the power within us, every one of us, to move it in a positive direction at any point in life.
Yes, it really is a powerful ability of the human brain, right? So if we're really going to drill down into neuroplasticity or brain plasticity, can you maybe for our listeners share a little bit about what that is and how we can use that to our advantage?
Well, the brain actually changes physically and functionally as a function of how you use it. It actually advances in its processing capability. So it's a very modestly formed machine when you're born, and it actually improves its processing capacity, its powers. It's like you have a factory in which you have machinery in it when you start that isn't really ready to make anything useful. But actually the machinery evolves as you engage it. And it rewires itself very complexly. I mean, the brain is the most complicated machine on the planet Earth to start with. But it has this incredible ability to specialize itself as a function of how you use it. And it's not just specializing itself in the sense of it actually evolves the machinery so that machines that can only operate, you could say, with low efficiency and at low speed when you start, ultimately can operate with very high efficiency and very high reliability at very high speed if you engage it with appropriate forms of practice. And we know this because every time we evolve an ability, we go from some primitive state where we're very, very lame and limited in how we do it, right? And then we advance progressively. And if we're intense enough about it or serious enough about it, we can go to a high state, almost unbelievably better than where we started. And that is a direct product of brain change. You actually have a different brain. You have a brain now that is, let's say, a tennis playing brain that before was not. And whatever the skill, whatever matters to you, you're subject to put yourself on a track of progressive improvement, of course, because that's what the brain is all about. It's a machine basically that's designed to change itself as a function of use. And Max, what a gift.
Yes.
Imagine, what a gift. And how underutilized a gift. It's astounding when you think about it.
Yes, it's absolutely astounding, right? And the way I always think about it is, like most animals, when they're born, right? They're basically able to function by themselves. They're able to feed themselves. They're able to hunt or whatever it is. But human beings were born like this lump of flesh and blood that can't even hold its own head up, right? And somehow through years and really decades of learning and growing and eventually learning to walk and then talk and move around the world and experience things, we're able to live these incredible lives and send people to the moon and do all these crazy things.
Right.
But only through the deliberate practice of really our mental faculties, right?
Right, exactly. And Max, one of the amazing things about our adaptive species is its adaptability. I mean, you can land a human citizen any planet, and they can figure out how to survive there and thrive there. and how they can develop all of the special skills and tools or whatever that's required to thrive there. And that is a pretty special, pretty advanced ability, or you could say range of abilities that comes directly from their brain plasticity, from the capacity of their brain to change as a function of use to their benefit. So we all have this within us. Every one of us is adaptive, just as adaptive as it, in ways that could have set us up for the challenges in life to make more of life than commonly we commonly do.
Yeah, it's super fascinating. What this makes me think of is this amazing quote by Abraham Lincoln. He once said, "Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I'll spend the first 4 sharpening the axe." Right?
Yeah.
So what this means for me is like you want to first maximize your ability to do the thing, right? You want to sharpen the axe instead of hitting it with like a dull axe, right? And that's really what we're talking about here with brain plasticity, right? We're trying to make our brains more effective. So that whether you're a student trying to get better grades, or whether you're working on a certain project and you want to do this smarter and better and more productively, you want to first improve your mental ability to actually perform the task, right?
That's a wonderful point. It's a little bit like a tree where you have to worry about the quality of the roots and the trunk, before you start fooling around with how you think about the foliage, I mean, you have to have developed the basic skills and abilities, you could say, that support complex and highly sophisticated function. And of course, that might take more elemental forms of practice. Maybe they were inadequate in your younger life, or maybe because of the way your younger life was directed, you never really refined those skills and abilities of support where you want to be in life. But at any point in life, it's correctable because it's all plastic. So you can think about what you need to do to grow that edifice, from the roots up. And it might require that you also, Max, many people don't realize, there is no real brain medicine. You go to the doctor and the doctor asks you how you're doing, and you say, "I'm doing okay." You've just had your annual exam. There is no management of brain health. Basically, in the medicine of the brain, they wait for disaster.
Yeah.
And when it's unequivocally clear that the train is off the track, then they give it a label and they try to treat it. But actually, we should be continuously managing our brain health. And there's a brain health issue. Every brain is not equally healthy, just like every liver or heart or kidney is equally healthy. And one of the ways that these differences are expressed is in the very elemental processing ability that the brain is capable of achieving. How reliable is it? How fast is it? How accurate is it in its operations? And reliability, accuracy, speed is absolutely an index of how healthy it is physically. Max, one of the most important experiments that I did as a scientist, I did this with other wonderful young scientists, is we made a whole list of not just wiring of the brain, but also the physical brain. You can think of the brain as an organ. How well is it vascularized? How well is the brain controlling blood flow and oxygen provision and so forth? How physically advanced is the brain? And then we looked at brains that were struggling, and we looked at 2 classes of struggling brains. I'm really old, and I'm beginning to, I can no longer control myself like I could when I was young. Or struggling brain number 2, I've had a really terrible early life. And now I'm a young adult, or the equivalent of a teenager, and everything is falling apart, right? Wow. And so we looked at these 2 classes of brains, and we contrast them with a brain that was young and vigorous and had a good life, right? And we looked at all of these things, and they were all degraded.
Wow.
In both the old brain and in the brain of the young, in this case, an animal model that had a terrible early life. And then we trained them. And we said, we're going to train them with the consideration of improving their brain health. So we trained them for a month. And in almost every index, the brain looked like the brain of an animal that had a good life, in a young, healthy, vigorous life. Also, the brain is plastic on a very large scale, and it's not just wiring. it's the things that relate to the health of the organ. So you're not just it's not just your job to try to continuously improve your life and your functional abilities and things that matter to you, right? You're just a damn fool not to do that. But it's also an issue of sustained health. And really, that's what the exercises at Brain HQ were designed to do. They're really designed fundamentally to improve elemental performance and to assure sustained health.
Wow, that is so interesting. And I really want to dive deeper later into some specific brain exercises and Brain HQ, what you guys are doing there. Right. But I really first want to bring home this point that you sort of alluded to, which is like brain health and performance is not like an old person's game, right? It's not until like you have to wait until you're 50 or 60 to start worrying about it, right? And so most of our listeners here, you know, young students, young athletes that really want to, bring their life to the next level. And so I think especially in that age, it's also important to realize like you don't have to wait 30 years to take charge of your brain and take care of it, but it's a like everyday job from the moment that you're born, basically, right?
Well, we should be managing brain health from birth to death. It should be a lifelong interest of and to the extent to which you're old enough and understand that you have this capacity to improve your neurological assets and to improve your health, whatever that age is, from that point forward, it should be important to you. Because it is important. I mean, your brain is you. Yeah. For God's sake, and to the extent to which you're evaluating the quality of your life, most of the things that you do not view positively are neurological, really. They're neurological. So, of course, you want to have a healthy physical life, but you absolutely want to have a healthy you. And so when you think about your functionality or you think about it should be an ever-present sort of background interest of you, just like your physical body should be an ever-present background interest to you. You should be, you're the keeper of it. You're a responsible agent. Yeah. It should be part of your consideration of having a well-managed personal life.
100% amen to that. And you start mentioning the physical aspect, right? And this is something also that, hasn't always been commonplace, right? In fact, it's only been a couple of decades now where, sort of popular culture has made exercise, going to the gym, running sort of a normal and healthy thing to do. Right. And I think we're sort of at the front, right? Where we're sort of trying to make mental training and mental fitness the same thing right now. We're just common and everywhere, basically. So for you being really at the forefront of this, what do you think it's going to take for sort of the general population to realize like, hey, this brain thing, it's really important. Like maybe I should start really looking into brain fitness and not just my biceps, right? Well, what do you think it's going to take for that?
Well, you're helping as we speak, but I think we need a movement. I've been trying to encourage officials in at a national level in the U.S. to acknowledge this as an important issue, because I think we need a movement in which or we can gradually, of course, this notion will win out. And the other thing that I think that is driving it is that there's enormous savings of money, and it's hard to make issues of money. That's just not really about issues of money. It's really about issues of human value and protection and have humans having a good life. But that will drive a lot of this, because we very, very foolishly neglect brain health at enormous expense. And so I think that ultimately there's just no question that this will become common parlance. But it could happen tomorrow if we could generate a movement around it. And still just a small fraction of people understand that their brain is continuously positively changeable and it's under their control. They are the captain of the ship. And that, in a sense, not to be exercising their brain in ways that are useful to them is irresponsible, or at the very least foolish.
Yes, and just to provide some data or some background for our listeners here, what Brain HQ, what your research studies have actually found is that the percentage of car accidents, like with your own fault, actually dropped by 48%. This was really mind-blowing to me, right? A 48% decrease in at-fault car crashes through the use of like these exercises, which is just mind-boggling if you think about it, right?
Right, and that was with 10 hours of work. 10 hours
Wow.
out of a life. That's a very small life, right?
That's just incredible, right? If you really think about how you could massively change like
Yeah,
the chance of getting car crashes all around the world.
yeah, right. So it doesn't take much of an effort to change the brain in a way that changes its operational performance characteristics. I don't mean to say that it's not effortful, because what I really think is that if you understood what your brain is asking you to do in your everyday life, it's not nothing.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like physical exercise. I mean, the brain, it takes exercise, takes effort, takes some consideration. But the value of it is enormous, because what it will translate to is a longer, healthier, safer life. And it will translate to a life of continuous improvement in your abilities to operate on the planet, as opposed to assured decline. And why would you ever choose to just to accept that decline? I mean, that's a rather silly, and well, it is an alternative. I'm saying people don't have the right to go to hell.
No, I totally agree. Very, very silly choice, right? But I think
Right.
it is important for people to realize that they do have a choice, right? Because most
You
people,
don't have a choice.
they like, if they've never heard about brain plasticity, for example, they think it's
Right.
just going to be this gradual decline for the rest of their lives, right? At the end of when they're like 20, 30, and from there on, it's just downhill, right? It's like a slow, gradual decline.
It's
But
the
that's actually not the case.
it's the I can't do that anymore syndrome.
Yeah, this like you can't teach it all like old like new tricks, right? And
You-
I think this idea really permeates culture, right? I've heard that so many times growing up. Like people told me, after a certain age, you can't learn that next language, you can't do
that-
this, you can't become great at this skill, whatever it is, right?
right. Why try that? Right.
Yeah,
Right. And part of it is that you imagine that everything should be effortless.
yeah.
Like I'm going to take up playing the violin when I'm 30. You imagine that's really easy, right? Because I'm older
Yeah.
and now. Well, all of those basic skills still take quite a bit of effort to master.
For
And
sure. Actually, I was just the other day, I was talking to Anders Ericsson. Don't know if you're familiar with him,
uh,
but he's a fantastic researcher. So also for our listeners that really looked at like what it takes to create expert performances, right? And what he's
right.
found is just takes a ridiculous amount of like thousands of hours of work to get great at anything. And so to your point, I think this aspect of it has to be effortful, right? Like brain training, just like anything else.
Right.
It should be, hard and challenging because otherwise you're not pushing yourself, right?
Right. No, actually, it's a condition for change. So a condition for change is that and it's one of the problems we have with Brain HQ, because Brain HQ is continuously challenging. So people that want to go to a computer and play games and fool around don't always like that. They say, well,
Yeah.
I'm never perfect. I never get all the
No, I
answers.
know.
Right. Well, if you got all the answers right, nothing changes in the brain.
Yeah.
You know this. They've actually studied this intensely. And, when you get all the answers, the brain knows that. Say, hey, I'm getting all the
It
answers
doesn't need to
right.
push, right?
Why would I change anything? So the brain is smart about that. So the brain actually enables change as a function of outcome, but it also has a condition to be in a plastic or a changing mode. And the condition is that it has to matter to it. You could put it that way. It has to matter to the brain. So in a sense, you have to be engaged. And you have to be, if you're in the mode in which you're evaluating whether you're doing things properly or not, or getting the answer right, or achieving your goal, and you don't achieve it, that's okay, as long as you don't achieve it only every so often, right? Because you're actually working on the level in which you can advance. And the other important thing about this is that most of important changes of the brain that relate to its health have to be progressive. You have to go from where you are and what you can do in, you could say, a series of small steps to get to what you really want to do, which might be a mountain above what you can do now, right? I mean, you can't expect to pick up the violin and play a great concerto on day 2, right? You got to go on a series of small steps. And that's true of any aspect of what you want to be better at. You say, well, I can let's try a little harder one today. Let's try a little harder one tomorrow. And it's in that taking life, this is not stressful, this is fun. But on the other hand, it has a level of seriousness to it. I'm not just fooling around. I am a living, vital human being with one chance of life on earth, and I'm going to continue to change in a positive direction, right? So I call it a spirited life. Just live a spirited life. Live a life as if the life matters. It's what you're doing matters. And I think that that can change everything, because you can put yourself on a forward progression and keep yourself there as long as possible.
Wow, spirited life. Can you elaborate a little more on that? That sounds really interesting.
Well, I just think that the critical thing is that you prepare yourself. You put yourself in the mode for change as a rule. If you think of what you're doing in your everyday life, and you think about, always think about, you put yourself in the mode of what you're doing in that everyday life of improvement. Could I be a little faster at basically manipulating this keyboard in front of us? Whatever it is. And so I just believe that you should live life with a lively, engaged, engagement of the things around you in life. And if your brain is healthy and lively and active, then one of the first things it does, it upregulates the brightness that commands your day. And that's the other aspect of it that we haven't talked about, Max, and that is that the machinery in the brain that controls learning rate, that controls change rate, and the machinery in the brain that basically controls your brightness, your alertness, how on the ball you are, how alive you are, it's plastic.
Yeah.
So when you live life, in a sense, just full of it, you sustain it. Mm. And you wake up in the morning, eager for life, and you live life with the lights on. Wow. You control the dimmer switch.
I love that, Matt. I love that. Absolutely. Because one of the big challenges I see it with people, like when I'm just walking through the city, most people are so checked out, right? They're like living this Instagram feed, like on their social media phones, right? They're like living somewhere else, but not here in the moment, actually being attentive to their life, right? Like the light is just switched off completely sometimes, right?
Right.
And it hurts almost to see that. So I love what he's saying here.
And that's a dramatic change too. I take a walk every morning in my neighborhood, and over the last 30 years, it's changed dramatically. 30 years ago, people acknowledge you on the street.
Yeah.
In my part of the world, which is a friendly place, almost everyone would nod to you or acknowledge your existence or in some other way, or give you some little polite greeting. Now, almost no one does. Almost everyone is self-absorbed in themselves, basically turned off to everything around them. And one of the most important things our brain is engaged to do is to continually examine the environment around them and look for things that don't fit it, and look for things that are interesting, or novel, or could engage it, could be exciting, could be something that we need to put a valence to. Is this a source of fun? Is it a source of threat? Is it a source of what? And you got to keep exercising the brain in ways like that. You can't withdraw from the world.
Yes.
So there are a lot of things about what is happening in a modern life that are really questionable from the point of view, and we could say are arguably very negative from the point of view of brain health, that add to our challenges of keeping our brain alive and healthy and growing.
For sure. And I think one of the biggest challenges I also see is like the lack of relationships nowadays people have, right? The lack of friendships, the lack of person, real conversation about real things that matter, right? Rather than just checking on their phones or whatever.
Or interactive games where in one way or another, there's a level of both of cooperation and competition. Those kind of activities that were so vital for us in making our adjustments of how we interact with people in the moment. And and also a withdrawal from the out of doors, a withdrawal from the physical environment. you know, it requires a change of our evaluation of what will find to be something that should pleasure us, or contribute to our to the valence that we have in our mood, because historically those things were largely controlled by what we saw outside, and now we withdraw from that to all of these artificiality, all of this artificial. So our whole weighting of how we adjust how we feel about things comes to this artificial canned form of delivery of the positive and the negative in life. And everything positive and negative in life shouldn't be limited to what we see on a little screen. It should be.
No, I totally agree. You know, I was talking to him, I forgot, somewhere at work the other day, and basically what he was doing is he was working with a group where in Russia, right, where they had like a bunch of farms and cows there. And what they realized is if they gave those cows virtual reality glasses and showed them like beautiful scenery of, you know, nice summertime grass and whatever else, right, those cows would actually produce more milk. And so like the cows in some farm in Russia somewhere in the winter, right, would live in this virtual reality of it being summer and nice and warm, right? I was like, this is the most ridiculous thing. But in some way, I think all of us are doing that, right?
I've often wondered about how wonderful it must be for a cow to come out after the first big rain and see all the say, oh, finally.
Yeah, finally getting out there again. Yeah, but it's just like the craziest example of how far we've really taken this like virtual reality and online and always on the phones and not really going outside and actually living life.
Yeah, no, that is a wonderful example.
Yeah, so one of the things I'm super fascinated with, I call this the fundamental 4 things of exercise, nutrition, sleep, and meditation, or some kind of mindfulness exercise. And I truly believe that those 4 things are so key to really general happiness in life. But how do they play into brain performance and brain plasticity? Do you know of any research there?
Well, first of all, when you think of exercise, remember that the brain is controlling your physical actions, and it's controlling their elaboration. So to my mind, exercise is only half useful if it's repetitive and if it's all about aerobics, or even all about aerobics and strength, because there's not much neurology in that. Where the neurology comes in is when you're challenging yourself to move in some new way, or in some more elaborate way. Or you could say it's better to think about, if I want to perform some action, to think about the 101 ways that I could do it and be good at all of those, as opposed to be good at one of them. And because behind that is a complex neurology. And you want to continually be refining and elaborating that neurology. So it's not just about it, and it's one of the really great ways to exercise your brain in general is to physically exercise in a ways that continue. So, you know, just to give you a simple example, I talk about this in my book, Softwired, as an example. We paved the world. So that's another way of saying we've done that so that every footfall is certain.
Yeah.
And because every footfall is certain, our walking can be stereotypic. We don't have to think about walking at all, generally. And so you can even go to a park in the city.
And even there,
the damn park pathway is paved, right? In a way, it's important because people can't walk now on the regular surface anymore.
So in terms of the phones.
But what's the native state? The native state is that every footfall is on potentially uneven ground and is uncertain. And every time that uncertain step occurs, that is to say, a little variation occurs, there's visual slip. Things move in our vision. There's a little stimulus to the sensations back from our body and our vestibular system, our system of balance. And all of those require a little adjustment. And there's a little variation in the actual movement we've made with our foot, our chest, our legs, right? Mm-hmm. What we're doing is we're continuously self-elaborating our ability to stand and move on the planet Earth, right? Mm-hmm. Now let's just remove all that. 200,000 practice tries a year. Let's just, in all kinds of ways, we do that. We go to the gym and we go to an elliptic some machine and we practice endlessly and we're very physically fit. Mm-hmm. but we still trip on the crack on the sidewalk, right?
Yes, yeah, that's so true. You know, how I always realize it when I'm walking like up a staircase, right? And like this one
Right.
stair, like this one step is like a little bit higher than the rest of it, right? And you don't pay attention, but because you're automatically just stepping every step the same way, you'll fall, right? It's happened to me so many times.
Right.
Also, what I've realized, I'm a huge fan of like mountain running, right? Going out in the mountains, right? So snow and water pits and, you know, in the forest. And every step there is uneven, right? Every step is a little bit different. And so your
Yeah.
mind is so much more, like there's such a greater demand on it than if you're just
Right.
running on the road, right? Because all of a sudden you have to pay attention. You have to look at your feet and be like, how do I not, you know, break my neck basically here?
No, that's what I was going to go to was exactly that. And that is that find activities in which there's variation of movement. You know, I mean, you can find it in a lot of activity games, you know, where there's a lot of variation of movement in a net game, generally, because you're moving your body in all kinds of ways that are that require that you basically hit the ball from any direction or in it, almost any posture, right? But get off the road, get off the sidewalk, you know, get out there on your bike or on your feet and scramble around on the earth again. That's really what you're designed to do, right? and that's a very good form of exercise. It's got all the aerobics, but it also has a lot of brain exercise. And if you think about it as something in which you're challenging yourself, I say, I'm going to go from this relatively simple form, and now I'm going to try this on a little different level and a little different level. You know, you can gradually get to a point where you're really, really much more efficient in your ability of your brain to control your action.
Yes.
And that's really what you're after.
I find it so fascinating, right? Because as children, we're always out there like exploring, right? Out in the wilderness, crawling through, you know, the forest and all this. And then when we grow up, we're told, hey, just don't get dirty, right? And like, don't, you know, do this weird stuff, right? Just walk on the sidewalk of the street, right? And we sort of become conditioned, right? To really take the easy path and always the clean path, and never get dirty, and never actually move in ways that would force us to neurologically adapt.
And Max, when you see that zombie on the street, walking with their cell phone or with their earbuds, you're seeing somebody that's really not paying attention to their walking. Their physical movement is absolutely automatized, and that person is really wasting the physical time they have in life. All they get from it is a very primitive level of aerobics. And they should be out there engaged. You know, basically, we're designed to be masters of our physical environments. We're designed to understand them and know them and know all of, you know, and to record their landmarks and know everything about them. Yeah. And yet, so many people are just withdrawn from that. If you ask the average person, you know, this is a point I try to make in my book, you know, think about the things that are on your street in detail. Go house by house and think of what's there. Think of the shrubs and ornamentation on the houses and all of the things. Then go maybe 2 blocks away, some street that you're very familiar with. Maybe you drive past it every morning, every evening. And now think in detail exactly what's there. Now go and look. And most people actually haven't recorded it.
Wow.
Even though it's part of their natural territory.
Yes.
If you were an actual human being in an early state of existence, you'd know.
You'd be dead.
Yeah, exactly. You'd have to know there. But you know, this is something we're designed to do. Our neurology is designed to do this, to continually examine what's where and to look for anything that's different or doesn't fit it. Because that could represent a threat to us. It could be something that is edible or usable or something. So, but the modern human is very, very poor at that. We're just not engaged when they're out there moving. And that's a loss. That's a loss.
For sure. And to this point, it makes me think of this story I heard recently of this, you know, this monk going to this, you know, the final test basically in front of the Grand Master of some monastery, right? And he walks into the door and the Grand Master asks, as the final question after years of study, he asks, what was the color of the flower next to the door?
I love it.
And the monk just just shakes his head. He forgot, and he didn't know. He didn't pay attention, right? Because he was so focused on this great question, right? and he walks back and trains for another 10 years. And that's really what this reminded me of, right? It's like,
Max, I'm going to steal that story. That's such a great story.
Yeah, I thought it was such a fascinating thing, right? Because we're always thinking so big in terms of these great things, but we don't pay attention to what's actually around us, right? The thing that actually matters most.
Exactly.
So we talked about some things now that people can do to really boost their brain health. But what are some other really specific sort of exercise that people, at home can try right now? Was it at Brain HQ or somewhere else? What can people do to really boost their brain health?
I think Brain HQ represents a good strategy for sort of finding your ground again. And especially if there are issues of brain health or issues of weakness that are emerging weakness, you could try to get back to a steadier point, but it's not enough. And the real thing to get to beyond Brain HQ is a readjustment of how you think about living your life. So what you really need is, but I recommend that if you, in any sense, think that you haven't been a good custodian of your life, or that just so you know, a lot of incredibly effective people use Brain HQ to advance, because everyone can advance the processing machinery of their brain. So, I mean, for God's sakes, Tom Brady uses Brain HQ. I mean, a lot of people use it to advance, right? So you can be at in a sense, the peak of your performance ability, but still benefit from it. But beyond that, a life of continuous learning. That's the first thing that I would emphasize. And by learning, I mean not just reading another book, which is also good, by the way. You don't want to continue your understanding of things, but learning new skills and abilities. Because that's basically exercising the machinery of your brain that controls change. And it's very elemental. You want to continuously exercise the machinery that controls change. So it's not just being active, it's being an active learner. It's being an active at acquiring new ability or advancing ability. Now, as long as you take anything, even the things that are well practiced. I mean, I might have golfed for 30 years, but as long as I think about golfing and being on a trajectory of trying to be just a little better, golfing for neurologically is more useful to me. Because now just that trying to be a little better basically means that I'm engaging the learning machinery of my brain. It matters to me now, right? So that's the first lesson, is to do things that matter to you. And then think about things that are important to you. And then just try to advance your ability in them. Think about things that you've always felt that are subject to many of these things that are not necessarily on a material skill level. They might relate something about how you're leading your life or living your life that irritates other people or that annoys you, right? Because all of those things are changeable in a positive way. You are a work in progress. So maybe you have things you should have gotten to a lot of years ago, but you can still get better at them, and you can still improve or correct them. So understanding, it's basically to live a life with a plan for change and advancing yourself in a positive direction in whatever matters to you. I mean, you want to continually be a more interesting and more effective a person, and you want to sustain your abilities and sustain your health. Max, one of the things I strongly recommend people do, one of the things that's easy to do at Brain HQ is to go there and work at exercises in which you look at things like your attention control or your processing speed. If you just look at how fast your brain is, you look at how fast your brain is at sustaining its accuracy. Well, speed accounts for about half of the variation of adaptive intelligence.
Wow. So
it matters that you keep up your speed, or that if you're a little slower than, and if you calibrate yourself and you say, well, I'm at the 60th percentile, that's not good enough. Shoot for the 90th. I mean, the same would apply to your accuracy. Is your brain reliably accurate? Does it make mistakes? Are you unable to control your attention? Are you unstable? Are you subject to distractions? At Brain HQ, you can calibrate yourself and see how well you're doing as a function of, in relation to other people of your age or as a member of the human race in general. And calibrating yourself is important. Ultimately, you'll be able to see in your everyday life, you'll be able to understand how you can calibrate your performance and things that you're doing in your everyday life. And what you want to be doing is managing your health. You want to be doing enough in your activities in life so that you're always fast and you're always accurate and you're always reliable and you're never too subject to distraction. Wow. So that's my basic advice to people.
No, I absolutely love that. And to me, what this speaks of is this deliberate focus on getting better, right? You really mentioned, right? Because it's not enough to just say, okay, I'm going to do these exercises, have a little fun, do a little thing, right? But you want to have to get better, right? You have to like have this focus on actually, trying to really stretch yourself to your limits and trying to see how good can I become, right? Can I really focus enough for these next 10 minutes and give it my best shot instead of just sitting there, halfway checking your email, halfway doing this. And it's also, trying to get a little effort only. You have to be focused completely, right? And actually do your best to then improve.
And also, when you do something that is just a little bit better, or maybe a lot better than what you did before, you should always reward yourself. You should always be paying attention to how you are doing.
Yeah.
Basically, because that self-evaluation, that process of self-evaluation, is the brain is continually evaluating how you're doing. It's evaluating how you're doing, and on the basis of that, it's rewarding you. It's saying, and that reward directly translates to change. Good job. And a good job signal to you means the brain has changed itself just a little. In the direction of that strengthens all of those things that contributed to that just occurring good job. It's a wonderful thing that the brain actually connects a sense of joy with positive change. So that's, or you could say performance success. When the brain is acknowledging performance success, it's basically enabling change.
Yes, I love that. And over the last couple of weeks, really, this concept of self-actualization, Maslow's, idea of, the hierarchy of needs, right? This has really become so interesting to me more than ever before, really, because to me, what this means is like the better you become and the more skills you gain and the more you become who you're capable of becoming, the more joy you're also going to experience in life, right? And I truly believe in that. And what you're saying here, because really the better you become, your brain is going to reward you for gaining new skills, for learning new things, for getting new insights, right? And all of this stuff actually makes you feel good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The brain, basically it's because you're exercising the machinery that contributes to your making you feel good, right? So that's not a surprise. That's working in tip-top shape, just as your performance is. And so that's absolutely right. You're continually engaging the feel-good part of the machinery of your brain. And this is one of your goals. One of your fundamental goals is to feel really positive about yourself. Another complicated aspect of this, Max, is that this also relates to self-identification. The captain in there, the person that you are, the self, is a product of your historic plasticity. So and it occurs because the brain is an associative machine, and it's actually constructed your operations in the world on the basis of what goes with what, and what is expected to occur in the next moment in time. What an amazing thing that is. But it's actually constructed your world on that basis. And it's actually constructed the relationships that are controlling the stream of consciousness, that force which can drive you in thought or drive you in expectation forward in life, or that carries you continuously with the things that have just occurred back in the previous minutes of your life. So all of this is because there are these continuously developed associations in what all of these things that go together at this moment of time that relate to the previous moment and the previous moment, previous moment. And all of the predictions going forward from this moment to the next forward moment. Now, every time the brain is performing an act like this, it's making a second association. And the second association is to the source. And the source is you. So every time you have a feeling or you generate an action, a thought, there's this second association to its source. Billions and billions of moments of association of you as the source. And you grow from that source into the person that you are. And one of the things you want to have lots of association with is with that person in joy. And that person in positive advance and performance gain, right?
Absolutely.
You want you to be a satisfied, self-satisfied, happy person. So all of this is plastic. You want that captain of the ship to be a reliable, powerful, effective captain. But you also want that captain to be happy.
Yes, and I think this is such an important point that like that process of getting better is not this, hunched over, like angry, frustrated, thing where you just like hustling your way through, but you actually want to enjoy the journey, right? And I think that's the point that many people oftentimes forget, whether they're students, whether they're athletes, that like the goal of the journey is not just to get to some magical endpoint and 20 years from now, but to actually love life every single day. And I think that's really one of the key takeaways here, is that like you can actually enjoy the process of getting better on a daily basis. And you don't have to wait for your brain to be perfect, for your performance to be perfect in order to be happy. Now,
and another part of that, Max, that's really important is that if you have something that you do in life that's in a sense episodic. I am an athlete, and I'm very effective at it, but I come to a point where I can't be, it can't be the center of my life anymore. So if you come to that point with the right resources, you have a very much higher probability of having a wonderful going forward life. Absolutely. Life is not over when part one is over. Because you are a work in progress. Yeah. The best things can always be in front of you, always be in front of you. And so you have to look at life that way. You have to think about life with appreciation of the gift you've been given. And that's the gift to change for the better at any point in life. Or, one of the great capacities that we do have, because our brains are plastic, we can reinvent ourselves. We can become something different and better in the next phase of our life. And maybe not with as much adulation, but certainly from the point of view of our own self-satisfaction, which is what really matters.
Absolutely loved it. I think especially for, athletes, I wasn't at that point, right, in a place where I had to give up athletics, due to injuries and all that kind of stuff. And really what I found is like, it's hard to shift, right? And I've seen many people, many other athletes struggle with that, right? Because you spend like years of your life pursuing this big thing, right? And now all of a sudden it's over and you're like, so what now, right? Like,
right.
But I think what's important to realize, especially for people that have put years and decades into this one thing, is like you can grow better in like so many other aspects as well. If you take that same mindset, the same, work ethic with you, and you pour yourself into getting great then at, whatever it is for you that you want to take on in that next chapter of your life. But I think that's such an important point, that life is never over, right? That until the day you die, you can get great at virtually anything.
Well, one of the things that most athletes have, or most people that were high performers have, is they do have an incredible self-control around self-improvement. So, I mean, you have a main critical asset, you could say, for driving yourself forward in a positive way, right? I mean, you know what you have to do to advance in a way that would be important to you again, right? You know what you have to do. So that's a great asset. I mean, it's of course it's somewhat self-selected. That's what if you don't have this basically nature and this ability, or you haven't developed it in your young life, you're never going to be a great athlete.
Yeah.
You're just not.
100%. Now, before I wrap it up, because I know you have to go soon, One thing I always ask every single guest of my show is we love to celebrate failure as a stepping stone to success and maybe even better performance down the line. So you had an incredibly long and successful career, but do you have one favorite failure that sticks out that actually over the long run made you a better version of yourself?
Well, in science you make errors. You know, sometimes you make errors. So I at one point I planned a series of critical experiments. I've spent about 2 years coming to a point in science where I realized that the fundamental premise of what I was trying to do, the brain didn't cooperate. So,
Wow.
so I had lined up experiments for several years in advance. It's complexly related to the plasticity of how you change performance in improving precision in operations and time, and how the brain accomplished that. I was completely wrong. And sometimes when you're completely wrong, you talk about it to other people. You get down this path and you talk about it to other scientists, and you say this is the way it must work, and that's not the way the brain decided it did work.
Decide not to work like that.
You know,
I think that's an important part of it, right? If you're like at the leading edge of research, there's going to be moments where like you think you have this incredible idea and it doesn't turn out that way.
But you're not supposed to talk out of church. You know, scientists are supposed to limit themselves to the things they know to be true and not blather.
Yeah.
So it caused a self-correction that was important.
For sure.
And then I've had similar things. I'd say my biggest failure knowledge failure in early life there was a realization when I was about 34, 35 that I was neglecting my children.
Wow.
And you know, you come to this realization that you're so intensely working on your work, you're so involved in your work. And I had 3 young children. Wow. And their mother was raising them. Thank goodness, she was such a good mother. But then you realize this, and you realize that you know, I did this because I began to think when I was traveling for maybe my 5th or 6th time going across the country on a flight in the year, that I couldn't remember what my children were up to over the last, you know, I had very little recollection of what they were actually doing over the last 2 or 3 months. And on a dime, I changed it. I changed how I related to them, and I decided to be a father again. But yeah, everyone has these times in life in reflection when they realize what they're doing is just fundamentally wrong. And so that's another thing in life. Sort those out. Your brain is plastic.
Yeah, right. You can always change it. So thanks for sharing that. That's such an important insight for people. Now, before I ask my final question, what's your favorite way to connect with our listeners online? What are your favorite social media platforms, Brain HQ, whatever links you would like to send people to?
Well, I strongly recommend that people read my book.
Yes, definitely.
Softwired. And if you're interested in the subject, I mean, and then I'm also just completing another book, so you look for that to come soon. But and it also has a website which basically provides the scientific documentation, you could say, behind the book and in extension. So that's another place. And then go to Brain HQ, because Brain HQ is full of information. I mean, you don't have to buy anything. It's inexpensive in any event. And Brain HQ is full of information about the plastic brain and how it's working and how to make it better and stronger.
Fantastic. I'm going to link to that then.
Those are the most obvious, simple. And then I have a pretty good notion that they should continue to watch your podcast next.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I did pay him to do that, by the way. No, my final question, and I've really enjoyed this. What does mental mastery mean to you?
Well, I think that the ability to control your operations and thought, and the ability to control your capacity to plan and to analyze and to operate in the domain of logic and logical is so critical. And life is so valueless without that, or so impoverished without that. And anybody that's not concerned about it, anybody that's not concerned about their abilities as a logical operator in the world, is shortchanging themselves in their life. And it's more than just your operational ability on your job, or it's your ability as a human to operate as a thoughtful, functioning human being and making the most out of life. And to my mind, if you're not taking care of your brain, if your brain is in poor health or has been neglected, if you're not making the most out of life, not making the most out of, getting the most out of your brain, you're not making the most out of life.
Yeah.
And why would you want to waste the one chance you have on the planet Earth to have a good and long and effective life?